the return of web fiction for Magic's main sets, WotC have endeavoured to give us not just the main narrative articles, but also a set of side stories to flesh out each plane. But these stories also give us a chance to see characters and their relationships unfold almost separately from their surroundings. Today we are looking at the Seanan McGuire story, Tangles, where the Planeswalkers Wrenn and Teferi meet for the very first time. Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, this is Nathan Cancel.
And today we are going to be talking about the Midnight Hunt side story, Tangles, written by Seanan McGuire. At time of recording, the Crimson Vow spoilers have been coming thick and fast, so we are now moving into vampire territory, moving away from the werewolves. But I think it's probably worth us sticking around in Midnight Hunt territory just for a little bit, because this is a story that you read when it first came out. This was the first side story to come out, so it came out with the first episode of the main arc. And immediately you turned to me, Nathan, and were like, we have to do a book club episode on this. So I think we're going to stick around in Midnight Hunt territory just for now to talk about this story, because this doesn't have really anything to do with werewolves, so it won't feel too werewolfy. And then next week we're going to move on to do a combined hype/flavor picks episode for Crimson Vow, and then we can talk about the Crimson Vow storyline, because it's a completely different beast. Sure. So, I mean, as I said, you wanted to talk about this story like straight away, immediately after reading it. But why? What's going on?
Well, we've got two protagonists in the story. Teferi, who is very interesting, very cool. It's very nice to see as an old walker that has a lot of really dense backstory that I haven't read. You know, I haven't read all of the old novels. Again, I always say that they're really hard to get hold of. Digitize them, please, wizards. Why not? There's also a second protagonist, someone that everyone's been hearkening to learn more about, get some backstory on, get some context for, and that's Wrenn. And sometimes in Magic, you have to follow along with plinky plonky gatewatch bullshit, and you're like, okay, cool, paint by numbers. And then every now and again, you get a combination of characters and an interaction, and seeing how their magic works together, how their philosophies work, just general dialogue and their perspectives being planeswalkers. And it feels like kind of what old school Magic used to be like, of, oh, let's explore these new worlds with these new eyes and these new directions. It felt like a proper fantasy kind of story, and it was two directions, or sort of two point of views. I thought wasn't expecting. I just wasn't expecting. And this story, as you said, has nothing to do with the main arc whatsoever. I think arguably, when you read through it, you kind of notice that this might have been taking place years and years before the current arc, because it says that it's Teferi's first time on the plane. And I don't think his first time on the plane is then immediately followed by going back to Ravnica and having, Arlen go, hey guys, you want to come and fix this Celestis problem I've got? And Teferi's like, well, I was just there, might as well go back again.
That's a good point. I didn't think of that. Yeah, when we find Teferi in the main story arc, yeah, he's in the Gatewatch HQ on Ravnica. That's a good point. I mean, this could obviously take place after the whole werewolf thing goes on, but it could be taking place before. You're quite right.
Yeah, it's only because the statement, I think, says where he says, oh, he's never been to Innistrad before, so he starts musing about things. And this is something we'll talk about in a little bit, because there's a couple of little bits of dialogue and hints that are just so nuanced and nice. And this is Seanan's first outing in terms of story articles. And then they also wrote the story article which accompanied the Zombie Commander deck, which I have yet to read, but loving basically the way they write and the style that they write in. It just kind of really engrossed me. Combining that with the subject matter that was different to the main storyline, and again giving context and explanation to Wrenn and because again they just got dropped in Modern Masters, and no one knew what the fuck they were. They had no context for it whatsoever. There was nothing, no details released, no home plane given, intentions given, nothing. Kind of like Grist, right? I'm kind of expecting Grist to get the same kind of thing in a couple of years, and we get a random story about them, so everyone can be like, finally, now I can have some information to back up my love of this weird quirky character. And it's kind of like a non-humanoid, as far as a Dryad is a non-humanoid.
Yeah, I was thinking about this. I mean, we'll talk about it a bit later, but yeah, on the subject of different races getting Planeswalker cards that are actually fleshed out, I think this is a good start. Cool. All right, well, let's just do a little quick story outline then, for those of you that may have not read it and are listening to this inexplicably, or have read it but just want a little refresher. This is just literally bullet point by bullet point, and then we can dig in things a little bit deeper. So yes, Tangles by Seanan McGuire. So we open with Wrenn and Six on Innistrad. Six is apparently from Innistrad and wants Wrenn to return them to their home in the Kessig Woods. When Six finds the appropriate spot, They communicate this to Ren, and Ren separates from Six, and Six reverts to its inanimate state. Ren then immediately begins to search for Seven, the next tree mech that they will bond with. Ren hears the song of a tree calling out to her and follows the sound. And then we move to Teferi, who is with a group of Cathars entering the Kessig Wood looking for a white witch that has been reported to have been hanging out in the area. Whilst Teferi is with the Cathars, he seems that he's only really there to kind of like pass the time and explore Innistrad a little bit. He's not really allied with the Cathars so much as he understands that they're not like the prevailing evil on the plane. And this is a kind of good vehicle for him to see more of the woods without having to necessarily just venture out completely alone. Teferi then finds Ren away from the Cathars and reasons that she is in fact the White Witch that they have come to find. After a little bit of a standoff, as is usual with most Planeswalkers, Teferi convinces Ren that he is no threat to her, and Ren and Teferi tell each other that why they're there and why they're on the plane. And Teferi learns that Ren needs to find a new tree to survive and share the fire that burns constantly within her, and that she also absorbed the fire after it destroyed the rest of her dried family on her home plane. So that's the kind of burning embers that we see in all the Ren cards. That's actually a fire that they absorbed when their Planeswalker Spark ignited, and it's the fire that kind of ripped through her home and kind of caused her to kind of traverse the multiverse. After being attacked by a powerful spectre, Teferi uses his time magic to ward it off, but inadvertently traps Ren and himself in a time bubble, seemingly much in a similar way that he trapped Zalfir in a kind of timeless void as well. He kind of recognizes it as being a very sort of similar mistake that he's made. This leaves Ren with almost no way to follow the song that they've been following to find the tree that is going to be her potential Seven, which is bad, because if they don't find a tree in time, they will die. After failing to physically escape the time paradox, Ren helps Teferi reach out and almost physically interact with the spell that he's created, much in the same way that Ren says that they do with their magic. This also allows Teferi to pick apart the imperfections of his magic and free them, eventually, from the time paradox. As they escape the spell, Ren discovers that the tree she has been singing to, a mere sapling it turns out, has absorbed much of the time magic that Teferi put out there and grown, in a matter of seconds, into a fully mature tree capable of hosting Ren. Ren and the Seven then depart Innistrad and hint at a promise to Teferi that they could perhaps help with his Zalfir problem, and Teferi continues his journey through the haunted plane of Innistrad. So as I say, that's just a very quick flyby of the events. It's quite a small story. It's mostly conversations. There's not much like combat or big set pieces. There's one little scuffle that they have with a spectre that emerges from the Kessig Wood, but other than that, there's very little going on. Yeah, really cool. Lots of little details about the multiverse that get chucked in as well. It's not just about where they are now. There's loads of like kind of expanded lore that goes on, right?
Yeah, well, one of the main ones that I saw, and this is like again why I really wanted to talk about this story, is that you get little comments from Teferi, and one of the ones I like the most is when he's kind of talking about how different woods in different planes, kind of like what the different trees they have, and he either says that oaks and elms, for example, could be found almost anywhere that had trees, and the scent of their leaves never varied as much as he would have expected it to.
Yeah, I picked up on that line too. It's a little bit like when Gideon is on Kaladesh and he's talking about the coffee that he's drinking, and he's like, well, every single plane across the multiverse has a brown, frothy, bubbly liquid that perks you up. It's kind of like, as shit changes, shit stays the same across the multiverse, it seems, which is really cool.
Yeah, like metaphysics, I think, is one of the biggest things that I find interesting when it comes to like magic, because the world, as much as the stories can be a bit naff or whatever, like the world within them, as long as they're presented effectively via, either the short stories, the novels, or by even the cards, kind of give you that livable world. I guess the guidebooks, the D&D guidebooks, are kind of like the best example of this recently, because they kind of give you a wealth of knowledge and depth of characters and lifestyles, right, of the way that the plane kind of works, without having it to be mangled together in a story that doesn't feel too kitsch or too like we've had some bad stories in the past, and it kind of undermines the enjoyment of planes a little bit. Whereas this is kind of gives, as you say, that context, not just to the plane, but also to the life of a planeswalker and like the way they view the world. And I feel like Teferi's one of these, he's got like one of the best voices when done right. I mean, it's so pleasant. He's so old, and yet he's still so sympathetic, calm, and kind. Like, his dialogue's always so gentle and engaging. And for someone who's seen so much of time and so many worlds, he always has such a sage perspective. Sorin, maybe learn something from this man, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing. And like, it's even commenting, this is, again, the writing in this is cannot, I don't think, can be understated. Like, the way that Shonen, like, has through lines throughout, like, kind of talks when he and Ren first, like, introduce their names to each other. She mentions that his legend travels farther than his feet, and this is echoed several times throughout the story, and it kind of gives him, Teferi, a bit of gravitas to those newbies that didn't necessarily know his full breadth of story relevance, or all the things that he's done. I mean, my man was trapped for hundreds of years in a bubble, a time bubble on fire, and, like, you know, it's things like that you're never going to know about or probably pick up on again. So it's nice to kind of get that kind of that almost. I don't know. He's almost like a legend of himself, beyond himself, right?
Yeah,
And
for
you don't
sure.
quite get that in the current stories. Whereas
Yeah.
this kind of gives you that little bit of perspective on him, of going like, oh man, this guy's a big deal. He's lived a long time, and yet he's still so pleasant to listen to the dialogue of.
Well, I think so much of the story that we've had of Teferi in recent years, if we say starting from Dominaria, the set Dominaria, where we brought back a lot of these characters and Teferi got reintroduced to the storyline and all this kind of stuff, because that was Magic trying to be like, look at all these cool old characters that we're going to give like a new lease of life to, and we're going to reintroduce them to the story, and it's going to be old and new coming together. Because they wanted to do that so successfully, they gave us a lot of backstory on Teferi and all these characters, and a lot of the characters that he interacted with in that little arc, things like, you know, like Joyra and Jaya Ballad and all this kind of stuff. They already know Teferi. They already know what he's about. They've either grown up with him or had many adventures with him, and so, you know, as much as you get a sense that this guy's a big deal, he's sort of, you know, joking around with those people as if they're old friends, and you know that kind of sentiment gets petered out throughout the rest of the Nicopolis arc. So as you say, it's really cool to see him interacting with planeswalkers who he's had zero interaction with up until this point. Even in his incredibly long lifespan, the multiverse is, you know, seemingly infinite. There are going to be planeswalkers who have never met him before. But the fact that his name has carried on to all those different planes, and people are like, "Oh, you're Teferi. Oh, right, you're like the planeswalker. Oh, okay, cool. Yeah, well, we know who you are, and for the most part, you seem okay." So yeah, you're right. And that motif of his stories walking further than his feet gets then flipped around at the very last line of this story, which is I'm just scrolling all the way down, which is especially to a man whose feet could travel farther than his legend. So, you know, it's this idea that although there are many stories about him, he could technically planeswalk to somewhere where people haven't heard of him before, you know, and kind of flips around that idea as well. So, yeah, I think Teferi was well represented in the relationships between other people. And I also like, and this is something that I think I've said in other media as well, I'm not a huge fan of dramatic irony to a point with characters. You know, like if you watch a film or something and there's some misunderstanding and they use that misunderstanding as the catalyst for like 2/3 of an entire plot. Like someone misheard a conversation or doesn't know that the person they've got a gun pointed at is really their son, you know, or whatever the hell it is. I find that kind of storytelling really lazy and boring. So it's nice that when they use that device as an initial, like, oh, there's a bit of tension, but very quickly the characters are able to catch up with the audience. We know Teferi's not there to hunt Ren. So Ren very quickly goes, oh, right, you're Teferi. Okay, well, fine, I trust you enough then. So we see that little bit of spark of fire and that spark of, like, I'm a dangerous fucking thing from Ren, but then that's not the whole plot. The plot is about them trying to find Seven. You know, the plot's not about Teferi trying to convince Ren that he's a good guy. We already know he's a good guy. Let's move on. And I think, yeah, that it was very, very well used, the kind of like misunderstanding through to understanding. You know, you don't need a whole story based on it. You need one paragraph at most, and then you carry on with your stuff, you know, which is good.
Yeah, I think there's almost like a direct line that he says, I don't know if I'm going to find it immediately, but it basically says conflict is like a really bad way to meet somebody. And it's almost like every single opportunity for there to be conflict here, it was kind of like, even when he's trying to handle that spectre, right? Because they get followed and this like abomination comes at him, and the way he deals with it is like, oh, I'll just send you through forward in time. I'm not going to fight you. I'm just going to let you die. I'm just going to let you like accelerate your lifespan and just kind of become non-existent, you know, find oblivion, as it were. Like, that's a very Teferi way of handling the problem. He doesn't want to have to, you know, slash and fight or burn or kill. He's just it's let's resolve the problem kind of quickly and as easily within his capability as possible, which I guess is his own character flaw, right? Because we then, and this is one of the main reasons I want to talk about this, because I think it's going to be massive going into Dominaria United, and that's Zalfir's probably getting phased back, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And it's such an amazing thing. If you didn't read this story, I mean, right. I guess it's the there's like a gulf between it. If you're so into the story that you really want Zalfir to come back, but you manage to not be into the story enough to read this story, I don't really know where you are in terms of your
It's a weird
commitment to Magic
balance.
Story.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? But if you do, for example, miss, because it's a side story, right? It's just a random side story. And a lot of the old school entrenched Magic fans, especially story fans, are kind of a little bit over the current story. They might not feel like it's got the same gravitas or the same need, or they might just want to pay attention to it anymore because it's kind of let them down a lot. This is a very easy thing to skip over and to miss. And I think it's a massive flag. Because basically the way that Ren's Magic works, it allowed to kind of talk organically about the inner workings of it. And it's funny because the way that she talks about it and then the way that we see Teferi interacting with it are two very different languages of magic. Because she talks about being able to absorb it in and the flow of magic, and it's kind of like water and it washes over you, whereas their magic, when Teferi's talking about it, he sees it like the minute hand ticking slightly out of synchronicity, or like the neck of an hourglass letting one too many grains of sand through, that kind of idea. And it's the way they communicate their understanding of magic.
It's a very
really
white-blue versus green-red way of looking at things. Do you know what I mean? It's exactly what you would expect from those mages, right?
That's true. I hadn't even thought about that, to be fair. I was thinking more about just the fact that the way he is a time mage and the fact that she is, a dryad. But yeah, of course, the mana that they channel, and maybe each mana channel is channeled slightly differently as well. Maybe this is a really good example of how blue magic kind of appears. I mean, I guess everyone has their own interaction with it, right? I don't necessarily think that Jace would have the same interaction with that kind of with the magic, but maybe that is kind of like how blue mana manifests itself more readily than how red and green mana manifests itself.
Well, I think this is something that the Boom series of comics, which are non-canon to be fair, but the Boom series of comics, I know that they've done a thing where we see each of the main planeswalkers in that, which are Ral, Vraska, and Kaya. They have like little visions of mana and traveling through the multiverse, and the panels show them all having incredibly different experiences. So it probably is different from planeswalker to planeswalker, but in terms of its intent, whereas like the blue and white would see things as kind of methodical problems to kind of eke out and sort of, like a clockmaker, right, pulling apart a clock and putting it back together again. Whereas a nature dryad who is also a planeswalker would probably see things as like a tangible like brush that they need to like unpick and formulate and find the little opening where the branches don't quite meet, as they say, and from there try and solve the problem. And this in fact turns out to be what helps solve the issue. And this I don't know if this was a larger intent, but it is a nice little wrinkle to be like, this is why there are 5 colors of mana. This is why it's not any one color in the Magic universe seems to be dominant. It's not just every plane is ruled by a blue mage because blue is objectively the best. There are different perspectives of things, and it's just really interesting that a planeswalker as ancient and as powerful as Teferi, even without having Old Walker status, can still learn something new from a type of planeswalker that he's never encountered before. Probably a race of planeswalker in a planeswalker state that he's probably never encountered before. Because he does have knowledge of dryads, and he's probably interacted with a bunch of them, but I doubt he's probably ever met a planeswalker that is also a dryad. So the fact that he's learned something new to the point where he even thinks, this could solve the literal biggest mistake of my entire existence. This could help rectify that. The thing that's defined him for the past millennia, is him losing Zalfir into a time paradox that he can't quite rectify. And he could never figure out why. And so for this to be like a potential way to fix that is quite a thing. And it's kept very quiet. It's kept very understated. It's in a side story for a character that isn't part of the main arc. So people might just go, oh yeah, running 6, whatever, that spooky ghost thing on that spooky tree thing on that card from, wherever that was. Modern Horizons?
I think it was Modern Horizons 1, yeah. That absurd expensive card that everyone's playing. I don't understand why it's so good.
Yeah.
I can't get hold of a copy, so who cares?
Right? Exactly. Really cool. I think it's really, really nice as well that we learn that things about Innistrad in terms of the larger multiverse. For example, that 6, as in Renin 6, which was the first card that we saw, is a tree from Kessig, as was 4, a previous tree that the Dryad kind of synced up with, and as is 7. And that the idea that Kessig, according to most planeswalkers, is where the best trees grow. So, like, people who know Innistrad go, oh yeah, the Kessig wood in Innistrad, that's where you find the best trees. Now, that's a nice little story beat. I would disagree.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, who the fuck decided that?
Well, like, you have places like Pyrulia and Zendikar and, like, literally anywhere where elves are, surely there are better trees. There are no elves on Innistrad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We've never heard Kessig's never been lauded as being, like,
Kessig?
the most... Yeah, of all the places. It's like going to, like, the English Winds and going, these are the best trees in the world. And it's like, have you been to America?
Yeah, have you been
Have
to
you
a
seen
redwood
the
forest?
size?
Yeah.
Have you seen the size of these trees? Like, what are you talking about? I mean, I guess, yeah, it's I guess that was, a strange flavor bee, but I guess it might just be for her needs, right?
Yeah.
Like, it might be that it's easier to communicate and synchronize as she calls it as their song, right? And we get a lovely kind of, this is why magic's cool as well, because it delves into questions that you might have in the real world about, like, how do trees communicate? Are they trying to communicate with us? This idea, and it kind of goes, well, we don't have to use science to prove or disprove it. We can be like, fuck yeah, they do, and then kind of lean into Ren's status as a dryad to kind of give us that window of opportunity, as well as kind of then expanding her character as well, because we have no idea who the hell she was, and we still necessarily don't. We don't get a lot of like facts, which is quite nice. We don't find out how old she is, that we know she's quite old. Like, I think it's deliberately stated a couple of times about how long she stays with her, as you call them, tree mechs.
Yeah.
So I think there's a chance that she's also potentially Old Walker, because I think we're still at like 100 years after the mending, if that. So I feel like dryads probably last quite a long time, and obviously have maybe some degree of lengthened lifespan regardless. So I think that she's potentially also got like an Old Walker kind of status. This could also still have been back before the mending. Again, we have no time frame or context for it, so it doesn't necessarily matter. But yeah, the idea that we get kind of to hear how the trees communicate together, and there's a statement, a fantastic little statement. Trees, because this is when she's talking about, she's referring to Six from his perspective. And then it's a little aside saying, trees had no genders as such, but dryads did. And upon discovering the concept in her mind, he, being Six, had considered his choices and decided he preferred the masculine.
Yeah.
That's so cool. It's kind of like mirrors the way that we saw Arlen and her wolf pack kind of communicating, specifically saying that it's not like normal human language, right? It's almost like an insinuation. It's an understanding. It's a thought process that links together. And again, like, we don't get these opportunities because normally when we're following Planeswalkers, they're just dudes who go up and cut down the trees and use them for wood for a fire, rather than a dryad that synergizes with them and can actually communicate with them.
I kind of like the idea as well that, as you said with the wolves in Arlen's pack, that writers are starting to really play with the idea that the sort of more humanoid races do have things that they can teach the more natural, like less sentient ones, I suppose. It's a very lazy thing, again, that, in any fantasy setting, the humans are just the worst. Do you know what I mean? They're not the fastest or the strongest. They're the most cruel, and they're generally not the brightest. Blah 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 blah. Or their concepts of morality are like outdated. Whenever there's an elf in a story, the elves are always basically just better humans. So I do quite like the kind of harmoniousness of the idea that the tree doesn't reject the idea of gendered pronouns or whatever. They kind of go, oh, that's an interesting thing. Well, I guess I'd be a he then. Do you know what I mean? It's a nice like, they work together. It's not just the dryad being like, oh, I need a tree to survive. Teach me, tree. Like, it's a partnership, right? And I also like the idea that that Ren describes in the story, that there is a little bit of pain about Six not wanting to continue on, because Six could go on without Ren. Six doesn't need Ren to be a tree, but Ren does need Six or another tree to be a functioning dryad and to planeswalk around. So there is this kind of ennui about Ren, that although Ren will listen to Six and will absolutely understand their want to go back to the Innistrad forest, there is this idea that almost there's like a rejection going on. Like, Six is done with Ren, and so Ren needs to find something else. But there's this respect of nature that, Ren could maybe force Six to keep going, but won't, even if it's a kind of rejection.
It's not at all. It's as you say, it's a partner. Like, you don't want to be. She said she doesn't want to use them as like a beast of burden, and I feel like it's almost like it's a gift that she's offering them. Right, it's a view of other planes, of other worlds, of other horizons, new woods, new soil. It's also kind of funny when she's forming with Seven. It's almost like the tree itself kind of has to, as quoted, unfold into a tree folk. Like, it's not a tree folk naturally,
no.
But once Ren kind of absorbs themselves into the tree, it kind of takes on that humanoid characteristic. It pulls its feet from the ground. It extends its branches out. It's such a cool concept for a character that we again had no understanding of, and a lot of people really wanted to know, because it was a very. I think at first people were like, well, how does it work? And again, we didn't really know, and the fact that it feels like such a symbiotic relationship, that she needs the tree to survive, and then the tree gets given little adventure, go to explore the world, and brings back stories for all its friends when it's finally finished. I think that's quite cute. I find that quite cute. And as you said as well, 3 different out of the 7 trees being from Innistrad's, like kind of really nice. It kind of grounds Ren way more than I expected to, because we don't find out her home plane at all. And it kind of felt out of place. I'm like, well, why Innistrad of all places? And I guess Keswick has the best trees. It's a good explanation.
Yeah, sure.
But it is quite nice to have another Planeswalker tied to Innistrad, kind of like how Liliana is, right? Like Liliana's not from Innistrad, but is tied massively to Innistrad itself.
Very much
like,
how
quite nice
Jace isn't from Ravnica, and yet he considers it his second home. There seems to be a lot of that going on, where Planeswalkers kind of adopt a new home. I guess because as they keep using...
A lot of their planes get destroyed.
A lot of their planes get destroyed, or they experience some kind of trauma which ignited their sparks. They don't want to go back, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. I don't think Ren is probably from a plane that we know of where Dryads are just yet. I reckon they're probably from a completely different plane we've never seen before, only because of the way that they look as a Dryad. Like, they're definitely not a Dryad from, say, Strixhaven, or rather Arcavios, I suppose. They're definitely not a Therosian like Dryad, because even though obviously their appearance is informed by the fact that they've got an eternal ember burning in their chest, they do look a little bit too spooky to be part of any of the Dryads that we've seen before.
Yeah, they're definitely not Ravnican, for example.
No, exactly.
Which Ravnican Dryad still makes no sense to me. It's a citywide plane and you've got Dryads. Like, come on.
I mean, well, how are they going to do any sort of green guild if they don't try and...
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah.
And also the Dryads on Ravnica, the Dryads on Ravnica are like the city Dryads, though, aren't they? Because they're essentially just humanoid, like with bushy hair. So, you know, I think they kind of get away with it.
Yeah, true. I also think it's nice that Teferi hasn't really learned. It's like he's still fucking up Magic after all these years, and I guess it's because it's also understated. I think it's understated in the story that the reason this happens isn't because Teferi is bad at Magic. It's because the Abomination was really powerful and kind of pushed against him, and he kind of had to overload the spell. I think the words were he had to push more magic through his fingers, and I think that's what the biggest thing about the voice that Seanan's kind of like talking through in this story is. It seems very understanding or wanting or willing to like explain in succinct terms like all of the things that normally get glossed over for the people talky action bits of normal Magic stories, of where it's all about like what the person's doing, where they it's not less about what the person is, where they come from, and more about like what makes up the world kind of around them, how the functionality of everything works. And again, I think they do a very, very good job of explaining it all. Like nothing feels too like, so I found the issue with the Midnight Hunt stories that they jumped about a lot. The voice was really cool, but I didn't get any real like clear direction. It kind of felt like it was very spasmodic and kind of how it was moving around. And even when it tried to do something a little bit interesting, like the flashbacks, it just kind of got confused and muddied. Whereas this seemed like, I mean, I need to look at what other work they've done, and I definitely need to read that other story back, the zombie one, because I feel like this is a great voice for Magic, like, and we might see them a lot more in the future, especially handling characters like, you know, Teferi or the brothers, you know, because we're going to be going to the brothers, the Brothers War next year, and that's a set that's going to have to be very carefully handled, because you're going to have to kind of like recanonize the story in a way that doesn't feel like it, but breaks it open, but also you got to give people like Urza and Mishra like a voice that holds true to the character we kind of know them to be, whilst also kind of giving them a new breath of life,
being a little bit likable and readable, and people aren't.
How do you write Urza?
Yeah, like, right? Oh, so you're just a genocidal madman. That's apparently the quote unquote hero of the story. Like, how are we going to make that person any sort of like protagonist we want to follow? Because they have to make them the protagonist. Because in that story, Mishra is the antagonist. So who the fuck do we side with? Like, yeah. It's just a mess, absolute mess.
So I feel like this is so great.
Psyched for it. I think that it's going to be, if they pull it off, it's going to be a hell of a thing.
It is, exactly. I feel like it's great to have writers like this where I kind of feel like the faith is renewed. Because there are a lot of writers that I'm like, oh, you've kind of made this person sound like a douche. Like, I feel like a lot of the problem with the Gatewatch is that they've been handled by so many writers trying to give that 2D caricature of them that we just never got any real character development. Or if we did get character development with someone like Jace, he just mind wipes himself every set, so it doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, like, it's funny to have such a long-standing character and a new character kind of both thrown together. And I think that was the biggest thing that kind of I took away from this story, was this, that we knew so much about Teferi, yet we still get a little bit more context of him. Again, we reintroduce him to the newer audiences. And then Ren 6, or Ren in general, is a new character that we don't have any understanding of whatsoever. And yet, from a fast outing, we've got a lot of time for. I really want to see what they're going to get up to and what they're going to do in the future. I also wonder if we're going to find out if it was, Nicol Bolas that set the spark of that fire, or if it was an accident, or whether we're not going to go back to her home plane, or what it means for future. I kind of hope it's an accident.
I kind of hope it's just one of those natural life and death cycles. Do you know what I mean? Because so much of like the machinations of the multiverse seems to have been, especially in recent years, for obvious narrative reasons, have all been like, oh, it was a demon that works for Nicol Bolas that just happened to also be interacting with everyone else. Oh, it was Nicol Bolas who turned this whole plane on its head and fucked off. Oh, it was this character that we've just met who was the problem for everyone else. So I kind of hope that it is just like the natural life and death cycle of a plane that this spark wielding dryad just happened to kind of, be a part of, and therefore had their spark ignite, so yeah, I mean, we'll see. I never really considered it. I just kind of, I wonder. I mean, they'll probably make it some kind of big plot point, and then it'll be part of
I feel like there's no way that they don't come back in Dominaria. I feel like you've planted the seeds, you've planted the seeds. So shut up. You've planted. It's so obviously set up, kind of for her to come back. So I think it even says in the end, like, she. And then we're well met, mage. I wish you all the peace and whatever you came here to find. I will aid you if I can in the future, but for now, I have promised 7 lands outside of Innistrad, and I must keep my word. Yeah. So I feel like that's kind of that's very much a statement of BRB. I'll see you in a little bit. I'm going to go and have a little bit of fun, but then I'll come back and give you a helping hand. I think it's also nice to see Teferi kind of weary of company. Like it says at the beginning of how Innistrad focus, so as much as they're averse to outsiders to begin with, as soon as they realise that outsider isn't going to wish them harm, they covet it almost as if like it's almost an opportunity of salvation, right?
God, they're so
every single Innistrad, he's like, is there somewhere else that's better than this? Please, anywhere else better? And he almost like laments at the idea of that some people are like stuck on their planes, like to their misery and to to the life that they're kind of born into, whereas he has kind of like, he doesn't even consider it to be like, oh, lucky me. It's like, it's just interesting that some of us can move away from the problems, whereas other ones are kind of stuck with them. And it's almost like he's wearied by the end of it of all of the attention. It's quite nice for him to just go like, oh, let's go for a wander in the woods. He's such an old man, he's such a typical old man. He's like, oh, these damn kids, all their noise. I go, oh, I'm just going to go on a little venture in the woods. So don't wander off, Grandpa. Too late. It's already wandered off. I also like, for all intents and purposes, had Ren not been there, he would have been stuck in that fucking wood bubble for forever. Because he even says like, he might have been thousands of. He says he might have gone over the spell 1,000 times without Ren's assistance and not been able to see the fault in it to be able to get himself out of there. See, I think he even said that he tried to push against the bubble, but with his spark, and he felt his like kind of sizzle and crackle back against him. Which is a very interesting insight into how like his time bubbles work and whether or not they'd work on other planeswalkers as such.
Yeah, I wonder if he'd have had to have used his magic in that specific way had Ren not been with him. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, interesting thought. I hadn't quite considered that. He's quite a lucky man, isn't he, Teferi? There's been lots of times where he's either fucked up or someone else has fucked up around him, and he's dealing with, like, as magic goes, like temporal magic is probably some of the most dangerous. So yeah,
good God, yeah. We're still not entirely. I mean, is it? I need to double check his exact story. Is he just straight up immortal from now on? I know that obviously Jorah has.
He does age, but it's just
but it's now just super, super, super slowly, right? Because I know that Jorah had the time water or whatever. That stuff. Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like well, he went into like a magical pool, right? He got doused in the Fountain of Youth.
But that
fucking Dominaria is so crazy.
Oh, that's not the same time water.
Yeah, the same
Jorah has, is it?
No.
There you go.
I think she invented her. I think she invented her own. Yeah, exactly. Right. I think we even said this when we were talking about Dominaria. It's like, how many different ways are there to be immortal? It's so convoluted and nonsensy. But yeah, again, like, it's just a really good explanation of her magic as well. The way that she almost like seems to. She doesn't have her own. We didn't see her aggressive magic, even though there was like a spark of like fire and heat above her hands, which is obviously the fire that she has internalized. But I think otherwise, like, I like to think of her magic as like synergy magic. Because that's what she does with her mechs, is she synergizes with them, and then she was able to kind of bolster and synergize with Teferi to kind of give him the strength and the power to kind of push back against his own spell. So I'll be interested to see how that works in future, because I don't think our Planeswalker really gave away much other than lands and free folk, which, and on another note, I literally had a copy of Arrive yesterday, and the card's beautiful. And again...
Oh, which one?
I think the Ren and 7.
Yeah. Which printer?
I had to get one for Teferi. The alt art one, the full
Oh,
art
see,
one.
I pulled one of those from a booster pack, and I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! This is like a 40 quid card. I have no use for it." At
Yeah,
all.
it's really weirdly niche. So obviously it goes in my Tassica's extra deck, which is why I
Sure,
need to be the
sure.
alt art, obviously. Yeah.
How do we feel about the concept that Ren? I mean, not the concept that Ren needs a tree to planeswalk. That I kind of get because it's like, they're one half of a whole, and then it's only when they feel at full strength that they can planeswalk. Because we know that planeswalkers can only planeswalk if they're like basically like free to. That's why they don't always just blip
Mm.
out all the time. Is because if they're under stress or if they're literally being punched in the face, they don't have quite the concentration needed to just walk away. But how do we feel about the fact that effectively Ren is taking a living thing from plane to plane?
So I feel like they went to a great length in this story to specifically make it understood that if there isn't consent and like given by the tree, if she doesn't offer autonomy to the tree to go, look, this is a gift I'm trying to offer you, but you don't have to take it. I feel like it was very much stated that she was willing to die over forcing a tree to go with her.
Yes, yeah, the consent thing's a big deal, but I also mean the fact that for the longest time, and indeed the plot point of many of the older stories, like Khan and Urza, the idea that you can't take living matter across the blind eternities is a
Oh, I
big
see. Well,
deal.
no, they fucked that up with Kaya, though,
Well,
didn't
so,
they?
well, Kaya has the ability to do it, and that's something to do with her ghost form magic. And then Mowu and Jing Yangu, Mowu's able to follow Jing Yangu around, leading to people thinking that it's actually
because of a
Mowu the
fucking
dog who's the
collar.
planeswalker.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he might be made of stone because he gets called a stone dog. So there's all these kind of like little niche cases. But even as
I
recent as
guess.
Ixalan, we had Huatli try and take some empanadas from plane to plane, and they dissolved.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what I'm saying is are we just accepting that once Ren is bonded with a tree, that the tree shares the spark completely enough to
Yes,
planeswalk, right?
that's what I think.
Okay,
So
okay.
I think the idea is that the fire within her is almost like it's burning her spark too bright, and she needs that spark to be contained within a vessel.
Oh, that's
And
nice.
then the
Yeah.
tree mech kind of provides her with that extra strength. But again, this is where she's saying, "Oh, it's a gift. I'm offering you this opportunity. If you are now hosting with me as a planeswalker together, I don't feel like you would never get a 7 card." Right, this is why the
Sure.
Planeswalker is Ren and 6. The Planeswalker is Ren and 7. Yes, the Planeswalker is Ren, but without the 6, without the 7, she can't Planeswalk. She is a Planeswalker, but without the ability to walk because she can't do it alone. Yeah, I feel like it's again that it becomes one entity even if it's two separate like cognizant consciousnesses.
Yeah.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah, no, I get that. Cool.
Yeah,
All right. Okay. I just
yeah.
wondered if that's where we were landing on it because they do seem to be playing a bit faster and looser with that concept. Understandably so, because it's very
Set yourself rules.
boring.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
right.
set
You have to
yourself
break
rules and then
them.
you're like, well, how do I get around this? I desperately want this other character to be on a different plane.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
I
I feel
think
like they wrote themselves into a corner, and this is probably the best explanation. This is the one that I didn't even think of. I was like, yeah, fine. Like the Kaya thing, I think is the most bullshit. Like, oh, I can just grant this power to someone else.
Well,
It's like,
doesn't she ghost
okay.
forms them, right? But then
Yeah, which
even
is
under Kaya's own
lazy, I
law,
think.
she can't completely ghost form. Otherwise, that's too dangerous. She has to keep some part of her
Yeah, she stopped
physical.
breathing and stuff like this. So bizarre. I mean, again, this is where if you do a story and you explain the metaphysics of it properly, like within this, I will accept anything. You could spill any amount of schluck down my throat and I will swallow it because I don't mind because you've done it in an effective fashion. You've given it a good context. I know wording, right? I'm sorry.
Magic story, schluck that you pour down my throat.
But I feel like sometimes it does feel like that. It's like you're trying to force it, and I'm like, no, I don't want any more broccoli. Stop it. Yeah, it doesn't. I feel like some of it can feel very. It feels like sometimes the author hasn't understood it themselves. They just kind of have to go, oh, well, if you say this is how it works, I guess I'll write it. Whereas I feel like Shonen's done a great job of being told that this is kind of how it works, and then kind of fathomed it within their own understanding of the story, and then discussed it and explained it, which I think is why it works so well and it comes across so well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I guess that does make a lot of sense. Have they also painted themselves? This isn't necessarily to do with Magic Stories so much, but have they painted themselves in with the convention of we've had Renin 6 as a card, and then the naming convention is the same for Renin 7, which was obviously a nice little reveal of going, oh, hello, like Renin 7. Like, obviously, the idea of it being 6 gave us very clear indication that they have multiple tree mechs, but the fact that the next card is a different tree is nice, and that kind of gives a little bit of narrative without almost saying anything. If they do another Ren card, it has to be Ren and 8. Like they can't stop at just
Oh,
2.
funny. I was thinking Red and 13, right?
Or
Just
whatever,
skip
or
it.
whatever.
Everyone goes,
Like,
"Wait."
no, but you can skip it. But what I'm saying is, you can't do like Ren and 7, like tree buddies. Do you know what I mean? You can't do like a little, because they'll do like, you know, Chandra Torch of
want that,
Defiance
though.
or Chandra Ablaze or whatever. They can't do like Ren and 7 like reunited or some bollocks. So it's going to have to be Ren and 8 or Ren and 13,
Yeah.
which means that we know
Yeah.
that 7 will die or not be with them anymore. Do you know what I mean?
I mean,
They've
it
now
depends.
ruined it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it depends if what Ren's arc does, right? Because Ren might find somewhere that she wants to stay at that point. She's no longer a planeswalker. She might like root herself. She also might find a resolution to the fire within her. Again, we don't really know what her intentions outside of this specific I need a new tree buddy was. Like, we don't know whether she's just roams naturally around, or if she
I
has
see what you
like
mean, yeah.
obligations or things like that. We don't actually know her intentions outside of I need to replant 6.
I mean, what
and
does
get a
any
new 7.
planeswalker really need to do?
It's big question, right? Big question, because a lot of them are new, a lot of them are still young. We've only seen them kind of handling the current conflict that their spark caused or was caused from, and then kind of resolving it. And then we're like, okay, well, now I guess we're just here forming the Gatewatch. Like, there's very few planeswalkers we have that we know either the attention, we knew the full story arc off of with that. Well, I guess it's things like Tibble and the Wanderer, right? Like, what are they doing? It doesn't matter. We'll pick them up when we need them.
No, but I have a lot of respect for planeswalkers such as Davriel Kane, for example, who they're not. I mean, as far as we know they have a past, but as of right now, they're not necessarily trying to go off and save some plane or like do some big grand gesture. They just want to sit in their castle and drink wine with their, like, you know, glib demonic secretary. You know, I have a lot of respect for that. This is why you see like TV shows like this might be lost on some of our on our non-UK listeners, but shows like Made in Chelsea, or indeed like I guess things like the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, whatever those kinds of shows are, where they're literally just rich people who on these reality TV shows have no conflict in their life because they have all the money and opportunity and comfort they could ever want, and so it's manufactured for them through like
fabricated
love lives or some kind of perceived slight that any other reasonable person in the world would just go, oh, that's a life thing, I guess I'll deal with that because I've got to go to my job and earn money so I don't die.
Right?
And I feel planeswalkers are in the same category of going, if you're nigh on immortal, have the powers of a god, and can planeswalk to literally any plane in the multiverse, you have no problems. Like, in your moment, your current life. Like, I don't care how much trauma you had that led to this moment. You're pretty fine. So, because especially compared to, say, a pauper on Innistrad, like, you know, like a peasant who's literally being attacked by werewolves and vampires and probably some kind of disease as well. Like, you know, you're doing okay. So they have to fabricate these big old problems by being like, oh no, I have to go and save this plane. No, you don't. No, you don't.
What a burden!
Just sit in a chair
I've got to be
and
the
drink some wine.
savior. I guess the flip side to that is we saw. What's the Bonder? The Bonder's name? Luca. We saw him in a similar situation, right, where he was just kind of like wandering with no direction. He kept getting like faced by like he was. I mean, I guess he could have just planeswalked to a different plane, but everywhere he was going in Aquarius was Aquarius of
Arcadius.
Arcavius, good God. Everything that was going kind of on there, like it kind of felt like he was just a stray wandering and like no one was willing to take him in. And that was almost like the opposite side of a place where like, I can't go back home because my home is alien to me and I'm a danger there and I don't really like the place there. And it's like, but I have no hope and I have no other place to necessarily go to because you can't planeswalk without knowing where you're going to, right? If you're a new planeswalker having not interacted with other planeswalkers, how do you explore the blind eternities? Or are you just stuck on the first place you land on and kind of go, well, I guess this is now second home until I figure out what the hell's going on?
I mean, that is the story of a lot of them, isn't it? That was the story of Jace. When Jace went to Ravnica,
true.
He was like, well, shit. And he actually hung out with the Gruul clans. And then that's where he got those tattoos from, you know. That is kind of what happens. I mean, see, what you've done there is you've taken my sort of very quite mean-spirited jab at planeswalkers as being incredibly privileged and making up their problems, and you've given them actual problems that do need to be sorted out and cared for. And it just so happens that, you know, planeswalkers are people too. So thanks for that, because now you've just made me look like a dick.
No, not at all. You know, it's fine to compare them to the fucks from Made in Chelsea. There is certainly some privilege. I did the same thing of where you've got some that are like Teferi, you've got some that are like Sorin, and it's nice to have the comparison. But I feel like, yeah, it's one of these things we don't really get, because the overarching, and this isn't me saying we need to focus more on Planeswalkers, okay, because that's not what I mean, but sometimes the story of the plane is so important, and like you have to hit the plot points. I feel like sometimes the Planeswalkers, their characters naturally just kind of have to hold on and see where they go. They don't really get a chance to kind of like decide for themselves whether they do or don't help in the conflict. It's like, well, there's this fuck off big thing going on, and all 5 of you said you want to do it, so I guess I have to do it as well. I don't want to be the dickhead, so I guess it kind of falls sometimes in between both, right? Of where you do have an obligation, but at the same time, you do have the free will to just kind of go, fuck it, I'm just going to go and do my own thing if I want to. And we don't tend to see that side of it as often, because it's less quote unquote interesting. But for a story like this, where very little happens, like a random planeswalker that we didn't know anything about, for all intents and purposes, has no interaction with any arcs or main plot points, needs to find a new tree, good, and oh look, Teferi did a spell wrong again. Like, that's all that fucking happens. And yet it's infinitely more interesting than following some cataclysmic global crisis.
Isn't that interesting? Like, the best, I think we've said this several times, the best stories of recent sets have been those kind of quieter ones. Like, for example, the one that jumps to mind is the story from Strixhaven, where Liliana is talking to Bellatrix Witherbloom, and it's just a conversation. It's just a conversation about the morality of necromancy, and that's just so much more engaging than insect beasts try and take over the school.
Pew, pew, pew.
Yeah, exactly.
Mage hunters.
Yeah,
Look,
yeah,
they were faceless fiend. Yeah, who cares? Like, whatever.
Which,
I guess that's the point, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is the main reason why I feel like we're probably coming to like a nice conclusion. We've wandered around a lot, but I think that's the reason why this jumps out at me, is it kind of gave a lot of information that was just unnecessary, but now I have it. I'm like, man, I'm really glad that they're willing to give us these kinds of stories. That they bulk out the fluff. Because if you don't bulk out the fluff and you don't give us novels, then everything feels so superfluous. Like you just dash into planes, especially recently when we're not quite doing block structure anymore. It's like I barely have time to figure out what a courier is and whether I like it before we're like, oh, Whiplash, Strixhaven, oh, Whiplash, New Capernia. It's like, okay, cool. Can I work it out yet? No, all right, fine. I guess we're back into Neon Dynasty, Bright Lights in Kamigawa. Got like fucking hell, calm down, slow down. And these are the kind of stories where, and again, maybe the side stories is why and this is why we like the side stories a lot more, is that because they do just give that little bit of fluff, that little bit of context, a little bit of world building that you otherwise don't get.
Well, this is how they used. Yeah, this is how they used the online fiction for a long time, when they did like for example, we did the book club. The first MTG Book Club episode we did was on family values, which was just that little Tajik and Taser Karlov story, where although it did have ramifications in terms of where the characters ended up in stories later down the line, it was effectively just a side story. But it was when the online fiction maybe didn't have quite as much direction or structure. They were going, well, we're not actually doing anything like big story arc wise. Well, let's just do an individual article about this person. Let's just do an individual article about Kiki Jiki and like the dragon, and that explains his card. So now the fact that they're actually formatting these side stories into the release structure of the online fiction, I said it when they first did it, and I'll keep saying it now, is a really good idea. It does somewhat give you a lot to read straight from the off. Like, I'm a lazy reader, so having 2 story articles to read each week is a lot for me to kind of fit around my life and all the other media that I consume, and that's going to make me sound very childish to some people who read like books in a week. But it is, for me.
Too many words. Too dumb, mate.
Yeah, do it. What? Do a YouTube video. Do a YouTube video. I can't read this at 2.5 times speed. Like,
imagine if you could read it to be fair, that's skim reading, isn't it? And it just doesn't fucking work.
Well, not when you're trying to absorb narrative, no.
No, exactly.
But yeah, no, I agree. This is exactly how you should use a side story. It's exactly how you should write Planeswalkers without making them feel too Planeswalkery as well. Like, the big problem with Planeswalkers is that, well, are there any real consequences to what they do? Because they can just fuck off somewhere else. So the fact that they do keep it very small and they do keep it very tied to the situation that they are in, like it. If you took away any concept of them being Planeswalkers, this is just a temporal mage and a dryad in a bit of a pickle, and this is how they've got to sort it out. And that's perfect. That's fine. So yeah, cool. All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thumbs up?
My only final statement. Yeah, thumbs up. My final statement that you're going to really hate is that if Ren needs the tree to survive and the tree's like a mech, doesn't that just make Ren Tony Stark and the tree an Iron Man suit?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit.
So Ren is now
Ren's
Okay,
Iron
good.
Man.
I've got my Iron Man in my Joda Infinity War deck.
Oh, do you know
finally
what?
figured out who Iron Man is.
War Machine. I think Ren is also quite similar to War Machine. Yeah, especially post Civil War.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my god. Gun mounted Ren and 8, please. Incoming when?
Wait, acorn guns.
Because there are metal trees. What tree is it? What is it playing that has metal trees? Is it Alara where the but also Alara, I think, Ethereum started infusing in with Naya, and the trees started becoming like metal. Oh, that would be fucking sick. Oh, Wizards, now, please, make it happen.
Could we see like a Teema Ren on either Alara or Mirrodin?
Oh, man, that'd be so cool.
Yeah.
A Phyrexianized Ren and stuff. Anyway, we're tangenting
you can say that about anything.
Now.
You can say that about any character. Oh, what about a Phyrexianized Jace? Oh, what about a Phyrexianized Chandra?
Well, normally I used to think that was cool, and now they slap that fucking subtype onto every Phyrexian-ish card.
Oh, get over it. I think it's good. It's good. It is what it is.
It's a hill I'm going to die on. I know. No shit, it is what it is. I don't have to be happy about it.
Yeah, whatever.
Cool. They're never going to give it to us. I'm going to have to keep getting angry about it. Phyrexia when, Wizards. Phyrexia when.
I'm glad also that, yes, this is a Dryad Planeswalker and that they've kept using them as well. Because, also like Grist, where they're not necessarily a humanoid, although it's kind of one fence sitting, isn't it? Because no, they're not humanoids, but I mean Dryads are humanoids to a point, and Grist is a collection of insects that happens to take the form of a humanoid skeleton. They could have taken any form.
Anything. It could take a no form. It could have just been a mass of bugs. Why did you have to make it, look, I can relate to it because it's got a skull.
Yeah. Well, we're getting closer. We're getting closer to them doing something like a Viashino Planeswalker or even a Centaur Planeswalker. It's still humanoid, but it's got horse legs. Anything.
If it's got a face, give it a spark. Yeah, if it's got a face, give it a spark. We're happy.
Give us Leviathan Planeswalker.
This is the thing, right? The Talon Gates was a giant Leviathan Planeswalker.
But do we even know that's true? That might not be true.
Well, now it might be hearsay, right? This is the thing, they're uncanonizing even their coolest bits of flavour. It's just ridiculous.
But they're uncanonizing it in story, which sort of works.
Yeah, which is the worst, because it's they're non-canonizing it within canon. I'm like, damn it! No, I want my non-canon to be non-canonized. That's fine. Anyway,
cool.
Whatever.
Well, what a lesson to leave this episode on. Good job. Side stories are awesome, and next week we'll be moving on to Crimson Vow. I guess just a little kind of like sort of leading into that. I am excited for Crimson Vow. The set does look really cool. I will say there are several aspects to it and the flavour of it that I am hugely not keen on.
Interesting.
Yeah. Cliffhanger for next week.
Yeah, cool. We'll have to delve in.
Yeah.
I'm going to cliffhanger by saying, if they can't fix the order in which they release story spotlight cards, some point soon, I'm going to burn their fucking building to the ground.
Yeah.
It's so annoying. It's so annoying. I hate to speak good of the War of the Spark time of Magic, but the fact they did acts for their story spotlight cards and actually managed to actually make it come out as in acts. The only argument I've heard that makes any sense to me is that someone said they probably had to put so much effort into making that happen. They went, fuck it, let's not bother doing that again. In which case, stop putting story spotlight on the bottom of the cards. It doesn't matter if you release them out of order. It does. Just literally organise your spoiler season better.
Yeah,
God's sake, I know it's always spoiler season for you, but come on, organise it better, Wizards.
I don't need to know. Do is give out your preview cards and then just go, Pleasant Kenobi, can you not release until this date? Which they do anyway. They already give them release dates. So
they already schedule them. Exactly. Don't give me Glorious fucking Sunrise before I've even seen Edgar Markov in his fucking suit.
Yeah.
Shaking the table. Anyway, whatever. Cool.
All right, cool. I guess that's that. All that remains for you to say, guys, is let's do our sign off. Shit, you almost did it last week, and I didn't even do it this week. All right, what side stories have captured your imagination in recent sets? Not just Midnight Hunt, but pretty much from across the board of since they brought back web fiction. What have been your favourite side stories? They are really, really good. So let us know. Let us know on our Twitter at mtflavouring, mtflavouring@gmail.com is where you can find our Gmail account, gmail.com account. In fact, that's where emails go, to the Gmail. Good. My personal Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is
at the Fox in the Moon.
And now, all that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
We'll see you soon.